The dust rose in lazy spirals beneath the hooves of the old mare as she plodded along the rutted trail leading to the Morrison ranch. Emma Hartley gripped the worn leather reins with hands already calloused from years of hard labor, though she was barely 19. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the Texas plains, turning the horizon into a shimmering line between scorched earth and endless sky. She had walked for 2 days from the last town, sleeping beneath the stars with only a thin blanket and the dress on her back. The mare was borrowed from a kind farmer who took pity on her, another orphan seeking work in a land that showed little mercy to those without family or fortune. The Morrison Ranch sprawled before her like a small kingdom carved from the wilderness. Whitewashed fences stretched as far as the eye could see, enclosing herds of longhorn cattle. The main house stood proud against the landscape, 2 stories of timber and stone, with a wide porch that spoke of wealth and permanence in a world where most lived in cabins or sod houses. Emma's stomach tightened as she approached the iron gates. She had heard whispers about this place. James Morrison was one of the wealthiest ranchers in the county, a man who built his fortune through sheer will after losing his wife 3 years prior. They said he rarely came home anymore, leaving the ranch in the hands of his foreman while he conducted business in Dallas and San Antonio. The housekeeper who opened the door was a stern woman named Mrs. Whitmore. Her gray hair was pulled into a severe bun that matched her expression. She looked Emma up and down with sharp eyes that missed nothing. The patched dress, the worn boots, the desperate hope behind her calm face. "Another one looking for work?" Mrs. Whitmore said flatly. "Yes, ma'am. I can cook, clean, mend, tend animals. I'm a hard worker." "Can you read?" Emma hesitated. "Some, ma'am. Enough to follow recipes." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Morrison's daughter, Sarah, is 6 years old. She needs attention. The last 3 girls we hired couldn't handle the isolation out here. The ranch is 15 miles from the nearest neighbor and 20 from town. It's no place for those seeking excitement." "I'm not seeking anything but honest work and a roof over my head," Emma said quietly. Mrs. Whitmore studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Trial period of 1 month. Room and board, $2 a week. You'll help with household duties and assist with Miss Sarah when needed." Emma bowed her head. "Thank you, ma'am." The first days blurred into a rhythm of endless chores. She rose before dawn to start the kitchen fires, prepared breakfast for the ranch hands, scrubbed floors until her knees were raw, hauled water from the well, and fell into bed each night too exhausted to dream. The other servants, Mrs. Whitmore, the cook Maria, and old Tom who tended the grounds, kept their distance, waiting to see if she would last. On her 5th day, she met Sarah Morrison. The little girl appeared in the kitchen doorway like a ghost, her dark hair tangled, her nightgown dragging on the floor. Emma was kneading bread dough, flour dusting her arms up to the elbows. "You're the new girl," Sarah said. "Yes, miss. I'm Emma." "The others always leave," the child replied matter-of-factly, though her voice trembled. "Mrs. Whitmore says it's because they're weak. Papa says it's because the ranch is cursed since Mama died." Emma's hands stilled in the dough. "Do you believe that?" Sarah shrugged. "Sometimes at night, I hear Mama crying in the walls, but Mrs. Whitmore says it's just the wind." Emma's heart ached for her. "Would you like to help me make bread? I could teach you how to braid the dough." For the first time, a hint of curiosity touched the girl's eyes. She climbed onto a stool beside Emma, her small hands soon covered in flour. When she smiled, really smiled, Emma felt something shift inside her. From that morning on, Sarah followed her everywhere. While Emma worked, the child trailed behind, asking endless questions about everything from why soap bubbles floated to where birds went in winter. Unlike others who shooed her away, Emma answered patiently, making up stories when she didn't know the truth. The Morrison house was a monument to absence. Mrs. Morrison's portrait hung in the parlor, a beautiful woman with Sarah's dark hair and soft eyes. Her belongings remained untouched in the master bedroom, as if she might return at any moment. The silence was heavy. broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock and the distant lowing of cattle. On a supply trip to town, Emma learned what people whispered about her position. The storekeeper's wife looked down her nose as Emma counted out coins for flour and salt. "You're the new girl at the Morrison place," she said loudly. "Another orphan, I hear. No family, no name, no prospects. Well, someone has to do the dirty work." Emma kept her eyes down. "Yes, ma'am. Just remember your place, girl. Mr. Morrison is a respectable man despite his absence. Don't go getting ideas like the last one did." On the wagon ride home, Maria muttered under her breath, then said in English, "Pay them no mind, Nina. You do good work. That's all that matters." But Emma knew better. On the frontier, it wasn't just work that mattered. A person's name and past, no matter how poor, followed them like a shadow. She was nobody, a girl whose parents had died of fever in a traveling camp before she was old enough to remember their faces. Yet when Sarah climbed into her lap that evening, asking for a story about a princess and a dragon, Emma felt rich in a way she never had before. "Emma," Sarah whispered later, sleepy-eyed as Emma tucked her in, "will you stay, please? Everyone else leaves. I need you to stay." Emma brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "I promise, sweet girl, I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the wind howled across the Texas plains, and somewhere a coyote cried to its pack. The Morrison ranch stood silent against the dark. Inside, three hearts, the stern housekeeper, the lonely child, and the orphan maid, waited for something they couldn't yet name. And far away, a man was already riding toward home, a man who would change all their lives before the next full moon. The October wind carried the scent of change as James Morrison rode through the gates of his ranch for the first time in 4 months. Dust clung to his dark coat, and his face bore the weathered lines of a man who had spent too many nights under unforgiving stars. He had been gone too long, tied up with business in Dallas and San Antonio. Cattle rustlers, land disputes, and endless meetings had kept him from home. But as the familiar outline of his house came into view, something inside him tightened, a mix of relief and dread. At 34, James cut an imposing figure. Broad shoulders, strong hands marked by rope burns, and storm-gray eyes that carried the weight of loss. The ranch was his pride and burden, and his daughter the only thing left of the woman he'd loved. Old Tom came limping out from the barn. "Welcome home, Mr. Morrison! Weren't expecting you till next week." "Finished early," James said, swinging down from his horse. "How's my daughter?" "Miss Sarah's well, sir. You'll find her inside." James handed over the reins and strode toward the porch. His boots thudded against the boards, echoing through the quiet. Inside, Mrs. Whitmore appeared, her hands folded, her face unreadable. "Welcome home, Mr. Morrison," she said. "Everything's in order. Shall I have your study prepared?" "Later," he replied. "Where's Sarah?" "In the parlor, sir." He walked down the hall, noticing how spotless everything was, the floors gleaming, the air faintly scented with soap and polish. At least the house hadn't fallen into neglect during his absence. But as he reached the parlor door, faint laughter caught his ear, a sound that didn't belong in this usually silent house. He pushed the door open quietly. There, in the golden light of the oil lamp, sat a young woman with honey-colored hair, her sleeves rolled up, a book open on her lap. Beside her, nestled against her side, was Sarah, sound asleep, her small head resting on the woman's shoulder. James froze. The woman didn't notice him at first. She was humming softly, brushing a strand of hair from Sarah's face with gentle fingers. The scene hit him like a blow, the peacefulness, the tenderness, the quiet love in the motion. When she finally looked up and saw him, her eyes widened in shock. She made to stand, but he raised a hand to stop her. "Don't wake her," he said quietly. "Yes, sir," she whispered. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then James spoke again, his voice controlled but sharp. "You're the new maid?" "Yes, sir." "Emma Hartley. How long has my daughter been having nightmares?" Emma hesitated. "Since I arrived, sir. Sometimes she wakes calling for—" She stopped herself, not daring to say her mother. And you comfort her? Yes, sir. I thought it might help her sleep. James studied her carefully. She was young, perhaps 20, her dress plain and her hands roughened by work, but her eyes, green, steady, and filled with compassion, unsettled him. Take her to bed, he said gruffly. Then meet me in my study. Emma rose carefully, lifting Sarah into her arms with surprising strength. The child stirred but didn't wake, curling closer against her chest. James followed them with his eyes, his jaw tightening at the sight. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the study door. Come in. Emma entered, her posture straight but nervous. She clasped her hands in front of her, keeping her gaze lowered. Explain yourself, James said. I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison. I know my place. I shouldn't have been in the parlor, but Miss Sarah. How often does she seek you out, quote? Every day, sir. She follows me while I work. I answer her questions, and at night she asks for stories. And you indulge her. She's lonely, sir. Emma's voice softened. She needs kindness. If that's overstepping, I'll accept dismissal, but I won't apologize for caring for your child. Her courage surprised him. Few dared speak to him so directly. He leaned back in his chair, regarding her with a mix of irritation and reluctant admiration. You forget yourself, he said coldly. Perhaps I do, she replied quietly. But tonight she slept peacefully instead of crying alone. Make of that what you will. James said nothing. The truth in her words stung more than he wanted to admit. You may go, he said finally, but remember your position in this house. You are the maid, not her mother. Yes, Mr. Morrison. She left silently, but long after she was gone, James found himself staring at the empty doorway, haunted by the image of his daughter asleep in that girl's arms. The next days were uneasy. Emma kept her distance, polite but reserved. Sarah, confused by the sudden change, grew quiet and withdrawn. Meals became silent affairs. James told himself it was for the best, that boundaries were necessary. Yet each night, as he passed Sarah's door and heard her soft crying, something inside him twisted. One evening, returning late from the fields, he saw them again, through the kitchen window this time, Emma kneeling beside Sarah in the garden, showing her how to weave flower chains. The little girl's laughter rose through the twilight, light and pure. He turned away quickly, but that sound followed him all night. The next morning brought news of trouble. Old Tom reported that the well water had gone foul. Drought had shriveled the nearby creek, and the cattle were growing restless. Without fresh water, the ranch wouldn't last 2 weeks. Emma, overhearing, spoke up before she could stop herself. There's a spring, sir, about 3 miles north, near the canyon. I found it while gathering kindling. The water ran clear. Tom shook his head. That's Comanche land. Too risky. James looked at her, his expression unreadable. Show me. Within the hour, they were riding across the frost-bitten plains. Emma's borrowed coat barely kept the cold at bay, but she sat tall in the saddle, guiding the way. You ride well for a maid, he said after a while. I learned young, sir. My parents were travelers. After they passed, I worked where I could, sometimes on farms, sometimes with wagons. You learn what you must to survive. He nodded, silent for a time, and now you're here. Yes, sir. They reached the canyon as the wind picked up. Just as she'd said, a small spring bubbled between the rocks. James dismounted, cupping the water in his hands and tasting it. You were right. It's clean. I followed the birds, she said simply. They always know where to find water. Quote, he looked up at her, really seeing her for the first time, not just as a maid, but as a woman of strength and quiet intelligence. You've got a good head on your shoulders, Miss Hartley. I just pay attention, sir. That's what keeps people alive out here. The wind turned colder, driving sleet against their faces. James frowned. There's a line shack nearby. We'll wait out the storm. They reached it half frozen. Inside, James built a fire while Emma tended to the horses. When she came in, shaking the ice from her coat, the warmth of the flames filled the small cabin. You should get warm, he said. That dress won't do you much good in weather like this. Emma crouched near the stove, her hands trembling as they thawed. James studied her from across the fire. In the flickering light, she looked younger, softer, but her eyes held the same quiet strength that had unsettled him since the night he came home. "Tell me about my daughter," he said finally. "The truth." Emma hesitated, then spoke gently. "She's bright, sir, but lonely. She doesn't understand why you stay away. She talks about you constantly." He looked down. "She reminds me too much of her mother. For a long time, I didn't know how to be near her without feeling that loss." "She needs you," Emma said softly. "Not as the rancher everyone respects, but as her father." James stared into the fire. "You lost your parents, didn't you?" "Yes, sir." "How did you go on?" She thought for a long moment before answering. "By taking one step at a time, even when it hurt, even when it didn't seem worth it. You keep moving because stopping means giving up, and once in a while, someone comes along who makes you glad you didn't." James met her eyes, and for the first time since his wife's death, something inside him stirred, a fragile warmth he didn't dare name. When the storm finally eased, they rode back in silence. At the gate, James dismounted and turned to her. "You found the water," he said. "From now on, you'll oversee the distribution, and you may resume your evening stories with Sarah." Emma blinked, taken aback. "Yes, sir. Thank you." Quote. As she walked back to the house, a faint smile touched her lips. For the first time, she felt not just tolerated, but trusted. And upstairs, behind the parlor window, James stood, watching her cross the yard, a strange new thought echoing through his mind. The maid had brought more life back to his home than he'd seen in years. The winter wind rolled across the Texas plains, sharp and biting, rattling the windows of the Morrison house. Inside, the air was thick with tension that even the warmth of the fire couldn't ease. Since the day of the storm, something had shifted between Emma and James, something both of them felt but neither dared to name. Sarah was happier now, her laughter once again echoing through the house. She followed Emma everywhere, and James often found himself watching them from a distance, his heart caught between guilt and longing. But peace never lasted long on the frontier. The whispers started in town, carried by gossiping tongues and sharpened by jealousy. The widowed ranchers getting too close to the help, they said. That orphan girl's after his fortune. None spoke it to his face, but James heard. And Victoria Ashford, the judge's proud daughter who had once hoped to marry him, was the one spreading it fastest. One Sunday after church, Victoria approached Emma in front of half the congregation, her voice sweet as honey and twice as dangerous. "My, how quickly you've made yourself comfortable at the Morrison place," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Some girls know their place. Others seem to forget it." Emma felt every eye on her but stood tall. "I'm only doing my duty, Miss Ashford." "Of course," Victoria said smoothly. "Though the way little Sarah clings to you, one might think you were angling to replace her mother. That would be quite the scandal, wouldn't it?" Quote. Maria, the cook, later found Emma in the wagon, her hands trembling as she held the reins. "Don't let that viper's tongue cut you, Nina," she warned. "That woman's poison. Pay her no mind." But gossip has a way of finding cracks to slip through. James began receiving letters from business partners and old friends in Dallas, warning that his reputation was in question. Even Mrs. Whitmore noticed. "Sir," she said carefully, "the town's turning cruel. Miss Hartley's suffering for your kindness." James didn't answer. He knew she was right, but the thought of sending Emma away filled him with a dread he couldn't name. That night at dinner, he made his decision, though it nearly broke him. "Sarah," he said softly, "I'm thinking of sending you to a fine school in San Antonio. You'd learn music, reading, languages." Sarah's fork dropped with a clang. "No, I'm not going anywhere." "It would be best for your future," he insisted. "I don't want a future without Emma," she cried, her small fists trembling. "You're sending me away because people are mean. I hate them, and I hate you." She ran from the table in tears. Emma started to rise, but James's voice stopped her cold. "Let her be." She turned on him, eyes flashing. "Let her be? That little girl just begged not to lose another person she loves. Quote, "You forget yourself, Miss Hartley." "No, sir," she said, her voice steady. "I remember myself very well. I was that child once, alone, terrified, believing no one would stay." James's jaw clenched. "You don't understand." "I understand better than you think. You're punishing your daughter to protect your pride, and in doing so, you'll lose her and me, both." The room went still. The fire crackled, shadows shifting between them. James's voice lowered, rough and tired. "You speak as if you love us." Emma's chin lifted. "I do." Before either could say more, Mrs. Whitmore burst in, pale as parchment. "She's gone, Sarah." She climbed out her window and took the path toward the stables. Outside, the wind howled. The night had turned bitter cold. James didn't hesitate. "Saddle my horse." "I'm coming," Emma said. "You'll stay here." But Emma was already pulling on her coat. "You can fire me tomorrow." "Tonight, I'm finding that child." They rode into the darkness, lanterns swinging, calling Sarah's name through the freezing wind. Snow began to fall, soft but steady, blurring the tracks. Emma's heart pounded with fear. "She'll go to the creek!" Emma shouted over the wind. "It's her secret place. She told me once." When they reached the creek bed, Emma spotted a small figure huddled under an old oak, trembling from the cold. "Sarah!" she cried, jumping from her horse. The child's lips were blue, her small body shaking. "I wanted to run away," she whispered through chattering teeth. "I thought you'd both stop fighting if I was gone." "Oh, sweetheart," Emma murmured, wrapping her coat around her. "No one's losing you." "Not ever." James knelt beside them, pulling both into his arms. For the first time, his voice broke. "I'm so sorry, baby girl." Together, they rode back through the snow, Sarah bundled between them. By the time they reached the house, dawn was breaking and the storm had begun to ease. That night, after Sarah was safe in bed, James found Emma by the kitchen fire. She was pale, her hands trembling with exhaustion. "She could have died," he said hoarsely. "My stubborn pride nearly cost me my daughter, and you." Emma looked up, her eyes tired but gentle. "But she's alive." "That's what matters." James took a step closer. "No, Emma, you matter." He hesitated, searching her face. "I've been blind. I thought I could keep you in your place, keep this house in order, keep my reputation clean. But the truth is, none of that means a damn thing without you here." Her breath caught. "James." "I love you," he said simply. "You and Sarah both. I don't care what the town thinks. Stay, not as a maid, but as my wife." Tears filled her eyes. "People will talk. They'll try to ruin you." "Then let them," he said. "Let them talk until their throats go dry. I'd rather live one honest life with you than a lifetime pretending to be the man I was before you came." Emma smiled through her tears. "Then yes, I'll stay." He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. The snow outside fell silent, blanketing the world in peace. Weeks later, their wedding took place beneath the big oak tree by the creek. Sarah scattered wildflowers as Emma walked toward James, the spring wind warm on her face. The ranch hands cheered, Mrs. Whitmore dabbed her eyes, and Maria sang in Spanish about love finding its way home. As James took her hands, his voice carried across the gathered crowd. "You came here as a stranger with nothing, Emma Hartley. But you gave us back everything. My home, my daughter's laughter, my heart. From this day forward, you'll never be just the maid. You're my wife and the heart of this family." Sarah ran into their arms as they kissed, her laughter ringing across the plains. And for the first time in years, James Morrison smiled, a deep, true smile that reached his eyes. The orphan girl who had once walked alone through dust and hunger had found her forever home. The lonely child had found her mother. And the hardened cowboy had found love again under the wide Texas sky.